What I'm working on now is fitting the braking system, or the final components of the braking system, which is the master cylinder. The brakes, of course, are a hydromechanical system. Hydraulic brakes on the front wheels, mechanical driven brakes on the rear wheels. This master cylinder basically operates not only as a master cylinder but as a linkage between the front and rear brakes. You push the pedal, it compresses the cylinder and actually moves the cylinder to activate the rear brakes. So it's neither mechanical nor fully hydraulic. I guess the best of both worlds. How it fits together, I have to use diagrams for that because I didn't pull this apart. I've got bits and pieces left over in terms of things I've managed to find. Still got to find the linkages. I'm pretty sure I've got the linkages to the rear, and I'm sure I've got enough linkages for the front, but I've got to look for those. This is a reconditioned unit. It was reconditioned by Beals Engineering in the United Kingdom, so I don't have to worry about that. I've got seals for the front slave cylinders. They're at the moment on the vehicle. I've got new hoses, low pressure and high pressure. I've got diagrams that show me how the whole system is linked up, and also how things like this return spring attach and where they attach. That's a new return spring. I've got these diagrams from Beals Engineering, show me how the linkages fit together, and also this one they provided as well, which shows me how the adjustments are basically made in terms of the rear linkages, the angles and so on that the linkages are set at. So that's important to have as well. Anyway, at this stage I need to look round for the remaining linkages. Once I've got that, then I'll sit down and work out how this all is put together. Now this is the linking system that I'm working on. The rear compensator up here behind the diff. The second, they call it an idle lever, that sits in front of the diff. There's the rear brake rod and there's the main brake rod going up to where all the master cylinder assembly is. These rods are adjustable. In fact, this is the one that goes to the rear compensator, goes under the differential. You can see it's adjustable both ends. I also have on here at the moment, this is one of the rods that attaches to the compensator at the rear, and this actually bolts onto the backing plate for the brakes, and you can see there's where the brake shoes sit in. So when everything's adjusted correctly, the compensator turns, this rod pulls, activates the brake. But to ensure, as I said, that everything's even, the rods actually need to be adjusted to the correct length. Now this is the rear brake pivot assembly. What it does when the brake pedal is pushed, two separate rods that are connected by another lever just on the other side of this diff housing pull this forward. That then activates the compensator and twists that fitting on the top there. That fitting on the top houses the two rods that go to each brake backing plate on the rear. So what you have to do, because the rods, the individual rods are adjustable in length, you actually have to work out what length the rods need to be to give these levers, this lever here and the one on the other side that I'll show in a minute, they have to be at an angle of about 15 to 20 degrees tilting towards the rear. So when they're both in that angle, the rods are then adjusted to achieve that angle when the pedal is not depressed. So there's a lot of adjustment to do before you can actually work on the rest of the braking system. The need is to get the rear system set up correctly with the correct length rods, so when the master cylinder is added into the system, everything works in sequence. So if you get these angles incorrect, you can end up with the compensator pulling more on one brake than on the other, so you'll get uneven braking on the rear, hence the reason for the adjustments. So you've got to get it into basically a neutral position, so when that is activated it does an even pull on each side of the car. Now this is the linking system that I'm working on. The rear compensator up here behind the diff, the second they call it an idle lever, that sits in front of the diff. There's the rear brake rod and there's the main brake rod going up to where all the master cylinder assembly is. These rods are adjustable. In fact, this is the one that goes to the rear compensator, goes under the differential. You can see it's adjustable both ends. I also have on here at the moment, this is one of the rods that attaches to the compensator at the rear, and this actually bolts onto the backing plate for the brakes, and you can see there's where the brake shoes sit in. So when everything's adjusted correctly, the compensator turns, this rod pulls, activates the brake. But to ensure, as I said, that everything's even, the rods actually need to be adjusted to the correct length. Now I know this is not a very good shot, but it's the best I can do. This is the idle lever. It sits in front of the differential housing on a support that stretches across the chassis. It connects the main brake rod, which is just there, goes forward to the front of the car, and on the back end there's a hole where the shorter brake rod attaches and goes through to the compensator. Once again, the angle of this lever here has to be 15 to 20 degrees sloped to the rear. So that's something you achieve when you adjust the rods. I'm just going to attach the rear brake rod on the driver's side, this one here. To do that I've got to get the hub off. Now to get these hubs off, they don't just slide off, unfortunately. They've got two set screws, one there and one under here. Take those out. Then it's not just a case of pulling it off, because it won't come off. It actually fits on the shoulder of the axle here, so it's a very tight fit. Now you can try and tap it off, but even tapping, you'll find that's rather difficult to actually get them to move. To assist with that, there are two screw holes in the drum itself, one there and one down there. Now I've just put some bolts in there, and what you do is you tighten those in. That pushes against the plate behind the drum, and then if you gently tap as well as screw these, you'll eventually get it to start to move on the collar. Now this one's just starting to move. I did tap it for a bit and tighten the screws in a little bit, then tapped it a bit more, and they've started to pull out. And I should be able to get it out now, mostly with these bolts. It's coming off. As I said, you can tap all you like, but it's tight enough to resist being tapped cleanly off. So I'll have to tap this side in and even the thing up. It's come off on an angle, so I've got to straighten it up and then get it off. So I'll get a rubber mallet. I don't like hitting it with a steel hammer. I'll just slacken this off and tap that in so it's coming off even. It's come off at an angle. It just took a slight tap with a rubber mallet. As I say, it was coming off uneven, so it's now loose. Get that off. Oh, no brake shoes. I've got to put those on. Okay. I'd say it was fouled up on the wheel studs, because it was coming out on an angle. Anyway, it's now off. I now need to, looks like I've got to find some more brake parts on the inside here. So I'll search around for those. I've got this will go in this side, and then the brake adjuster will go on that side. I'm sure I've got some of those in a box somewhere, so just have to search around for those and then start building this up. Well, I found a brake adjuster. I've just cleaned it up, removed all the dirt off it, removed all the grease out of the fitting itself, and everything's clean. What I now need to do is to grease that up. Now, I don't know what other people use, but on brake parts I use copper grease. So, having cleaned it all up and taken all the grease out, I need to replace it, and I'll do that, say with copper grease. It's, as I say, I don't know what other people use, but for parts that are likely to get heat from brake friction, copper grease is usually sort of used on other cars that I've got, so I see no reason why it shouldn't be used on this as well. So I'll put a fair bit in there, make sure I get some on the threaded adjuster. Also get some on the cam there. That's important. Pull that out. Slide those in. These are what ride on the cam, and then as the cam is moved, the pistons come out. Just make sure I get some grease on those. Wind this right out. Easier to wind this right out when you're trying to put the shoes on, otherwise you'll find it more difficult. It's difficult enough as it is when you're trying to pull the brake shoes against the tension of the springs, which are quite strong. Anyway, I'll now put this on the backing plate. 2 bolts hold that from the rear, so that's ready to go on. I'm ready to put the other fitting on, which is just sitting on the floor here behind me. This has already been greased. I'll fit that on as well, and then I'll set about to try and put these brake shoes on. As I say, sometimes this is quite difficult because of the tension, but anyway, see how we go. I'm just putting the control rod mechanism in place. That goes in here. You notice that the holes top and bottom are slotted, and that means that the mechanism can be moved up and down to centralise the rod. So when I put it in, I'm holding the camera with one hand and this with the other. When I put that in, right, okay, I can't actually bolt that straight up and tighten it because it has movement up and down. So what I've got to do is put it in, not loose, but certainly not tight. So when I put the brake shoes on, then I've got to raise or lower it to ensure that the drum can go on. So the shoes need to be basically centralised within the drum. So there's a little bit of fiddling around to do with that, but I'll start by doing the nuts up on the back, and I'll get it to a point where I can just move it. Now, the other thing to look at, it's a bit awkward here, I'm actually lying down. Right, now, you can see the mechanism in there that I've got to attach the rod to. Now, you've got to make sure you attach it the right way around, and where it is, it has to go, whoop, as I say, it's a bit awkward, it has to go on that front end, because when that mechanism is pulled by the brake rod, it pulls in an anti-clockwise direction. So if I put this right on the other side, it's going to push in, which is incorrect. It actually has to pull away from the backing plate, so it's got to be on that side. So just something to be careful of when you attach everything together. Now, putting these brake shoes on is not easy. Probably two ways: get someone else to do it, or if you're going to do it yourself, it's a bit of a struggle, or it has been for me anyway. So what I've done, I found that the only way I could get them on was to first of all attach the springs the way they're meant to be to the shoes, then feed the shoes up to the backing plate, and starting with the bottom end here on the adjuster, I put the bottom shoe up into the adjuster, and then with a lot of struggling get the top one up into the adjuster. Now that's quite difficult. To get that up, it's what I found anyway was to push that side up first into the slot on the mechanism there. Once that was in the slot, then by brute force this shoe up. Now that took a lot of effort. What I did to assist with that was to actually use this small shifter and attach it to the back of the shoe like that to give me some leverage, and then pushing up on the shifter I was able to actually get it up onto the top of the adjuster. Then the challenge is to get it in the slot. Now when you're pushing it up, the plunger here tends to turn, and it turns so the slot doesn't line up with the shoe. So the best I could do is to get it up and sit it on top of that, and then with a stubby screwdriver try and twist that round so it went in the slot. Anyway, eventually it went in. Once the top shoe is in place, then I would say it's just a simple exercise, not really, but using a bar or a heavy screwdriver like this, levering it up onto the axle and pushing it down, and then sliding across into the slot. So it was easier to get that one in than it was to get this in. But anyway, after a lot of struggling, it's now in place. Now I need to see if I can get the drum on, and once I've done that, then I'll see how I go on in terms of connecting those brake rods up. And just so you know, the drum didn't go on. The whole brake shoe mechanism wasn't centralised. I mentioned before the brake control rod, that mechanism can slide up and down, so I had to tap it to make sure I could get the drum over the shoes. So it's now on, but I've left that mechanism loose, and what I'm going to do is to actually connect the brake rods up, and also connect it to the handbrake cable, and then once all of that's set up properly, then I'll pull the handbrake cable to make sure that's fully on, and then I'll tighten up the the nuts on the back of that. So that then should be having the brake shoes centralised within the drum. Now I'm starting the brake rod adjustment with the main rod first. It's pretty hard to see. On the back of the whole mechanism, I've got a piece of paper with 15 and 20 degrees marked, and you can just see the white on the other side there. It's actually got a weight on there, so that bit like a plumb bob, that gives me the vertical, and that gives me the angle to the rear. It's because it's paper, I've actually got it sitting in the center of that bolt because I've actually pushed the paper onto the split pin on the other side there. At the moment that angle is not enough. It's just looking at it, it's probably less than 15 degrees, so I'm going to put it closer to 20 degrees, so I've got to lengthen this rod. So once I've got that angle right, the rear angle is fine, it's close to 20 degrees. Once I've got this right, the length of that rod right, then I'll adjust the length of this rod here. Sometimes things aren't as they first seem. Now, this is the main brake rod to the rear, and I was just setting about to adjust the length of that, but then realised that to get that right, that is influenced by the handbrake rod, which is that one. If that one's the incorrect length, it alters the way this whole lever mechanism works. In other words, it can give the appearance of either a short rod here or a long rod, depending on how far that's pushed back. So what I've done is that I've disconnected the handbrake rod, and now I'm going to set that rod to the right length. I've already adjusted the angle at the back to get it close to 20 degrees, and now I'll check the length of that rod, having achieved the correct angle at the rear and stop the influence of the handbrake rod. I've now adjusted the rods, connected the handbrake, but I haven't actually put the split pins in any of the rods, and I haven't tightened up the lock nuts at this stage. What I'm going to do is to now adjust the rear brakes on the brake adjusters and get them up to where they normally would be, and see what impact that has on the operation of the both the brake pedal and the handbrake. The additional benefit of that is that I'm hoping that once I get the shoes adjusted up, when I apply the brake pedal or the handbrake, it will centralise the mechanism in the rear brakes. Now I've managed to centralise the rear brakes with the handbrake, so they're okay. Still haven't connected the linkage permanently, but I'll leave that still until I've done the actual front brakes with its master cylinder. So that's it, just sitting on the top there. Let's put the light down. Now the master cylinder goes down in this hole, connects at the front on a lever and the back onto the rear braking mechanism there. The hydraulics, of course, have to be attached, the inlet and the outlet, but before I do that I actually have to clean up the the old fittings. Now they've just been cut off. I've got to undo the fitting in there. Now, I do have two of them in case I make a mess of one, but hopefully it'll come off. They don't look like they're going to move. There's a fair bit of corrosion on the fitting there, but I'm hoping if I soak it long enough and then apply copious penetrating oil and then if necessary heat, I'd rather not. These fittings I assume are more than likely brass, so I don't want to apply heat if I can get away with it, but I'll take my time. I certainly don't want to destroy them because then I can't complete the job, but when I've done those, then I can start fitting this master cylinder in position. That's going to take a while. It's I've probably got to pull these linkages off, front linkage at least, so I can get it down in through the hole, because it's actually, this linkage comes through a hole in the chassis there, that linkage goes through a hole in the chassis there. So complete, as a completed unit, I think I would have a little bit of difficulty trying to squeeze it through. Anyway, not to worry about that at the moment. This stage, it's get these fittings cleaned up. Well, certainly they're the same. I just want one of those, and that's the fluid in fitting. So a little bit of work to do yet. Also, when I get these this hydraulic system in place, I've also got to centralise the front brakes. The control mechanism on the brake, which in the case of the front brakes comes through a slave cylinder, they weren't on the car when I got it, so I've actually got to re-centralise the front brakes. The reason I know that is that the drum won't go on the brakes as they are at the moment, so there's going to be a little bit of fiddling to do with the front brakes as well. But anyway, it's getting there. It's all the mechanical side is right. Handbrake works. The drums at the rear lock up. That's good, and they free up when the handbrake is released. So all of that's working. I now just need to add the hydraulics.